I welcome especially our presenter, Mary John. You all know Mary John. She is not a foreigner to us. So she is a theologian and has a PhD in missiology. She has been here in Rome as mission secretary from 2003 to 2010, and then was on the team, on the congregational leadership team from 2014 to 2022. And now she is the associate executive secretary of UISG. So Mary John, we welcome you most heartedly, and you have the floor. She will speak 20 minutes, then we have a short break just to move a little bit, then another 20 minutes and a small break, and then we go into the breakout rooms. Okay, Mary John, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, all of you. I'm so happy to see so many familiar faces on the screen. Thank you for your interest and your passion. I will share the screen now. Key synodal concepts, our journey as a congregation, and our passion for a global mission. Can you all hear me? Is it okay? Thank you. I shall give a brief overview of what a synod is. The first part, the presentation will be in two parts. The first part deals with what a synod is and the synodal journey, synodality, etc. And the second part, where we will reflect together on a SSpS global mission. As you said, after the 20 minutes, maybe there will be just a very brief pause. And I will use only a few slides because sometimes it intervenes, no, with the technological side of this. In the first part, I will use a few slides. So, implications of synodality for SSpS global mission. Basically, what we will say is what's a synod, the stages of the synodal journey, the constituent elements of synodality, that is communion and participation and mission, of course. Then the symbolism of the tent, hosting communion and participation. Then the second part would be SSpS global mission. And in what way are we like others? In what way are we different? And communion and participation in global mission, etc. There will be also time for some group work and the plenum. So, okay, without much ado, let's go into the meaning of a synod. What is synod and what is synodality? You know, the principal synodal question is this: how is our working together, which enables the church to proclaim the gospel in accord with the mission entrusted to her, being achieved today? And if we paraphrase it for our congregation, it will read like this: how is our working together as a congregation entrusted with a global mission being achieved today? The literal meaning of synod is working together. Actually, the synod means the assembly of the clergy, of the bishops in the Catholic Church. That is the common understanding of the word synod. It was Pope Paul VI in 1965 who first instituted the Synod of Bishops. And as such, this word is associated with hierarchy, patriarchy, and exclusion, because by and large, the women and the laity have been excluded from the synod. So how did this word, which was until recently a word for exclusion or patriarchy, has now become the central word? Some years ago, we would have refrained from using this word. What happened? One of the reasons is the novelty of the word synodality, because we were also getting tired of words like discernment, walking together, participation, dialogue, etc. So when the word synodality appeared on the scene, it received immediate attention. And chances are that with the conclusion of the synod, this word also will make its exit. It's quite possible. But for now, it's a new language. Now, having said what the synod is, what is synodality? Synodality, if the synod refers to an activity or an event that is happening in time and space in the organizational structure of the church, synodality means a different thing. Synodality denotes the particular style that qualifies the life and mission of the church. It's a way of being church, a process that includes listening, discernment, participation, and inclusion. It points to the direction the church will take in the future, how it will go ahead. And by inference, synodality for a religious congregation is also showing how it will go in the future. What will be the way of making decisions? In leadership, it will reflect through a less pyramidal and a hierarchical, more circular and dialogical style of functioning. Now, going to the synod, this is for not all of us have always the chance to go through all these things. All these are all available in the website, in the synodal website. I will just take you through the different stages of the synodal process thus far. We had the opening celebration in 2020. Then there are three different stages. The local national stage, which was in the last year. The continental stage, which is completing this year very soon in June. And the universal stage in two parts in October this year, with the first sitting of the synod and the second sitting in 2024. Opening the synod in 2021, Pope Francis quoted Pope Paul VI, who inaugurated the synod of bishops. He said, "Communion, that is cohesion and interior fullness in grace, truth, and collaboration. Mission is apostolic commitment to the world of today." The local national stage was mainly done at the level of the conferences of religious and institutes like seminaries or other religious institutes. Questions were sent out and the responses to this questionnaire was collected and collated, and from OSG and OISG, the Union of Superiors General of the men and the women alike, we collated the answers under 6 headings. And so they come under these headings, like the second, that is the first level, the local national level. That is the local churches, the bishops' conference, universal church, the document, and the implementation stage after that. So once again, just to go through the stage 1 is the national, local, stage 2, the continental, and stage 3, the universal. So on this national local stage, we have collated the answers under 6 perspectives. That is stories of synodality, seeds of synodality, weeds in synodality, fruits of discernment, consequences of synodality, and concrete proposals. I'll just touch upon each of these very, very quickly. The stories include the success stories, how the synodal processes were applied to general or provincial chapters and assemblies, reviewing of the constitutions and information programs. Many success stories. And the seeds of synodality include the presence of women in decision-making bodies of the church, involvement of the laity in ecclesial life, and new initiatives from the part of the church and religious congregations, dialogue, shared vision, hospitality, new paths of solidarity and inclusion. The weeds in synodality, you can see there are also some weeds. It's in the sense that lack of collaboration from some quarters, even doing nothing about this synodality in some parts of the church, or attitudes contrary to the synodal spirit, gender imbalances, clericalism, unwillingness to practice synodality in religious institutes, and clinging to outdated structures and practices. The fruits of discernment is that the Holy Spirit is revealed in synodality through closer relationships, building bridges, communion, unity, where all have a voice, all are heard, simple, fraternal, pilgrim, and welcoming. For consecrated life, the fruit of discernment shows itself by enriching humanity through the charism and by working together in the same direction. So, what will a synodal church look like? Let us fantasize, no? That it will be a church that goes out, an innovative church in collaboration and discernment, less clerical and based on the common vocation of all the faithful through baptism. This is one thing that the draft emphasizes. The baptism is the fundamental core, and the religious vocation is a deepening of the baptismal commitment. So, in summary, it's saying it is a conversion to the Holy Spirit, led by the Spirit, walking alongside the Holy Spirit. So, when we come to then they give a certain proposals about inclusion and participation, etc. Since this is not the final stage, we move to the next stage, but where it asks the limits of synodality in a real practical life. Can all decisions be made in a synodal way? Is it workable? Can everything be discussed with everybody? Can all be included in everything? So, what are the criteria for making decisions? So, this draft also asks these questions. It doesn't give the answer, but it poses these questions to us. And when we move to the continental stage, which we are in now, there were 7 continental assemblies. And in my opinion, it's one of the most significant stages. If you have read the working paper for this stage, it's a beautiful document. And then we have the final universal stage, as I said, the 2 synods proper in October this year and October next year. Now, coming to the synod proper, there will be 70 non-bishop members, half of them women, who are full members of the synod with voting right. These 70 non-bishops will be chosen by the Pope himself from a name of 140 names prepared by the bishops' conferences. From the women religious, from UISG and from USG, 5 men and 5 women are also asked to be full members of the synod. We have already almost come to those names now. The aim is that the church will be more complete, and it will be a joy to have her represented in her entirety in Rome. Okay. Now, I would like, you can find all this and more in the website. I would like that we move to some of the key concepts of this synodality. Communion, participation, and mission. When you see the synodal theme, you can see these sub-themes. Why these sub-themes? Because these sub-themes actually tease out the full meaning of synodality. And communion and participation I particularly mentioned because mission is the central point. we are talking about mission. It is the umbrella. It is the playing field where communion and participation play their role. So we are talking about mission. And I feel in some way, communion and participation, they don't go along the same, they don't have the same connotation as a mission. Because if we explain communion and participation, we are actually talking about the way we are in mission. So communion, it is difficult to define communion. So I would like to describe communion. What is communion? Communion is feeling the pulse, they say. It is the connection one feels with the other, which is often invisible but deep. I would like to give my own experience, the communion I felt when I was on a short flight within Indonesia some years ago, from one community to another. And I was a bit nervous because I had no language, I didn't know, a completely new place, etc. I was sitting at the back of the plane and I saw a few rows ahead a sister. And I didn't know who it was. I didn't find anybody in the boarding gate or anything. So I thought there's a sister. Somehow something told me that might be an SSpS. So I went ahead and then I asked her, and lo and behold, she was an SSpS. Now, I could hardly talk anything with her, because I did not know Bahasa Indonesia and she did not know English. But what I am saying is just the realization that there is another SSpS in that aircraft with me made all the difference to my journey. Suddenly, I became so, happier, freer. All that nervousness fell away, and the journey became very enjoyable. I don't know, something that for me was an experience of a community, that there is another SSpS with me in this place, For me, it was an experience of communion, although we couldn't talk much. You may also have seen, when you look at the ocean from a distance, you can see some mountain peaks popping up from the water. No? They look like distinct, separate mountains. But actually, they are all connected under the water. It's a series of mountains connected under the water. But we don't see that, They are, because the distinction and the separation are only above the water and from a distance. I think communion is also something like that. It's a feeling of being connected. And for this to happen, we have to get closer, to go deeper. From a distance, we are separate, distinct, not connected. And coming closer, we feel affinity with the other. Living in international communities, in intercultural communities, you will know that very well. To elaborate this point of communion, I would like to narrate to you a children's story of the ash tree. In a forest, there were many types of trees. There were tall and majestic oak and teak and pine. There were also small, humble, common, ordinary trees like the ash tree. And the pine and the oak used to make fun of the ash tree. They said things like, look at them, they are really ugly. Look at the way they spread. They are everywhere. They are pretty useless. And there are so many, etc. So they despised the ash tree. One day, a young farmer came to the forest. He wanted a handle for his axe. He got into conversation with the trees and asked what wood might be a good handle material for his axe. The pine and the oak said in one voice, cut the ash tree, cut them. There are so many anyway. They are everywhere. Cut them. So the farmer cut the ash tree that was closest to the pine and the oak and went home. The next day he came with his sharp axe and a new ash handle. He began to cut down all other trees. And as he approached the oak and the oak said to the pine, "Friend, I think we made a mistake. We forgot that we are all trees at root. We forgot that the death of one of us is the death of all of us." Now, transferring this to the congregational level, what does this story say about communion? We are all human beings at root, and we are all SSpS by call. The diminishment of one of us is the diminishment of all of us. The progress and increase of the congregation in one part is the increase and the progress of the congregation everywhere. It challenges us to spread our parochial thinking. During the pandemic, you might have heard this axiom saying, "None of us is safe until all of us are safe." And we experienced it ourselves. So I was trying to explain to you what communion feels like, without really defining what it is. The next subtopic of synodality, or the theme that explains the nature of synodality, is participation. Participation in the church's mission, in the congregational mission, and in the local mission. A couple of months ago, I had a short home visit, and my youngest brother is very actively involved in the parish. He's actually managing the temporal goods of the parish. And I asked him what was going on with regards to synodality in the parish. And he said, "Synodality? You never heard about it. And when was this? Where was it? And what are we supposed to do?" Actually, this is not a single instance. In many parts, not much is happening. This is to show also how little some people participate in the mission of the church. And sometimes we also feel as a congregation how we can make all SSpS participate in the mission of the congregation. There is something that Pope Francis keeps repeating in his encyclicals, which interested me. He says that in Amoris Laetitia, he says in Evangelii Gaudium, in Laudato Si, and in Lumen Fidei, and that is this: time is greater than space, the whole is greater than the part, reality is greater than ideas. Actually, I could not understand this, so I went through these documents to see what he means at different contexts, and it has a lot to do with the participation. What he says is, time is process, fluid and in motion. Time is propelling us to move ahead. Time refers to fullness, whereas space is limitation. Space limits us. Is a possession and enclosure. Space, he says, is getting stuck or blocking processes. So he asks to give priority to actions in which generate processes. So in that way, a new process is set on motion in this launching of the synodal journey. And the second thing is, the whole is greater than the part. It is to avoid narrowness and banality. It is true that the part keeps us grounded where you are, where we are. And we must work on a small scale in our neighborhood, in our locality, but we must not lose sight of the larger perspective. It points to people who think too much about their circle of safe and comfortable friends and allies, and too little about the people around them, who want to inhabit the big issues of the day without reference to the people around them. I am quoting the Pope in this. So actually it refers to the principle of the common good in Catholic social teaching. It's one of the fundamental principles of Catholic social teaching, the common good. And the third one, it says, reality is greater than ideas. Jesus did not redeem us with ideas and statements, but taking on human flesh and by pitching his tent among us. It means to give flesh to our dreams and ideas by concretely performing acts of justice. He says, realities are there. Ideas are to be worked out. The reality of vulnerability, struggle, doubt, and depression are there in our context. You know that more than me. Now, why I am saying this is, this principle has implications for SSpS mission, especially in terms of participation. It's challenging us to sense the times we are witnessing today, to consider the whole reality of the congregation instead of the part that I am in, to nurture passion for mission, not only in lofty ideas and prayers, but also in courageous and generous availability for the reality and needs of the mission, of the congregation. Still on the synodal process, I like that we reflect a little bit on the synodal symbol of the tent, because the tent captures the idea of communion and participation. The tent, so to say, hosts communion and participation. This is a very strong biblical image of the tent that is used in the Continental working paper. There's a section called Listening to the Scriptures. It's a very small section, but it's a very beautiful section on that. What does the symbolism of tent say with regards to synodality? It's a powerful biblical imagery, and the entrance to the tent is an important location, because in a tent, that's all there is. The most prominent part of a tent is the entrance. And because it is not so comfortable, the entrance is where people sit. Abraham was sitting at the entrance of the tent, and so he could meet the three visitors. The people of Israel used to come out and sit at the entrance of their tents to meet Yahweh, who spoke to them through cloud and fire. And together as a people of God, they moved. Tent is a symbol of communion. To be under the same tent is to be in communion. It is a place of close familiarity, interaction. So one has to adjust a lot with the other also, and there must be a certain understanding to be inside one tent. The church is such tent, expansive but not homogeneous dwelling, capable of sheltering open all, but open to letting in and letting out. Tent is also a symbol of participation, in that it is extendable to include others, to invite people and to be part of it. Tent is not a fixed structure, immovable or fortified, but is flexible, so it can afford to let people in. It's basically an open space, a space brought inside. So there is nothing to guard fiercely in a tent. We don't keep treasures in the tent. And because of this, it is a free space where one can afford to meet the other. And all it needs is some ropes, some pegs, and some clothes. The synodal theology is best expressed through the imagery of the tent. It's a symbol of mission, because it proclaims the one who pitched his tent among us, John 1:14, who sent out and instructed us not to carry spare tunics or haversacks or money, but to be on the move, not to linger, not to be stagnant, but to move on. And tent is that symbol of constantly moving. It reminds us of the millions of refugees who live in tents, who are awaiting for inclusion and integration. Tent is an imagery of being in mission, of being sent out and moving. The tent imagery can be applied to our congregation, our provinces, and individual SSpS. It means for SSpS being available to the call of the Spirit through the congregation. Our congregation is a tent, 134 years on the way with Jesus and being led by the Spirit. Constantly asking to enlarge our spaces, to let the refugees and migrants, the marginalized and the vulnerable in, and to participate in our life and mission. We move with other congregations in our provinces and regions on individual and collective journeys. Like the people of Israel who settled in tribes, our communities are also spread in 40 plus countries in an ever widening act of enlarging our spaces to include others, to respond to the different realities. We are called to stretch out, therefore, but also to move. The tent structure is a metaphor in that it expresses the need for discernment. The Holy Spirit is pushing us for the renewal of our strategies, commitments, dedication, and motivation so that we can all walk together and reach those farthest away with enthusiasm and joy. Tent tells us that we have begun the journey, but we are not there yet. Although we are all 134 years, we are not there yet. The synodal journey has begun, but has a long way to go. And that it's a sign of hope, because we hope that we will reach the destination. Our provinces and regions are tents. Our communities are tents, opening their entrances to people around them. Enlarging our tent is at the heart of fulfilling our mission. Communion must lead us to a permanent state of mission. Meeting and listening to each other, dialogue, reflection, discernment, and all these are positive things are good, but they are not understandable if they are not directed towards pushing us beyond ourselves and our communities in reference to carrying out the mission. Individually, each one of us is a tent. Our global mission beckons us to open our hearts and minds. Pope Benedict XVI, when he was still Cardinal Ratzinger, was once asked by an interviewer, "How many ways are there to God?" he answered. And his answer was, "As many as there are people." For even within the same faith, each one's journey is an entirely personal one. The individual's faith journey, and that each of us comes from a unique time and place with a history that is not identical to that of others, can make this possible. And yet, in communion and participation, together we form one congregation. And I think that is the beauty of our congregation. So, dear sisters, this is the first part of the reflection on synod and the synodality. And maybe we can have just 2 minutes to stretch. And then we come to the second part where we will reflect on the SSpS global mission.
Mary John.
Yeah.
Yeah. So welcome and please continue.
Thank you. Welcome, sisters. I hope I'm not boring you with this. Okay, we go to the second part. That's about SSpS global mission. And the document says once again that we are going through challenging times. Synodality itself is a challenge and poses many challenges, but it's also very rich and eventful times. We have the synod coming, the jubilee coming, and so it's also a very precious and a spiritual time. Being in OISG and having encountered a variety of congregations, now I come to realize more deeply the uniqueness of our congregation. There are around 2,000 member congregations in OISG, some very large ones, well established, old, and and others are very young, new, and struggling. There are also some around 500 congregations coming to conclusion, meaning coming closing down in Europe and North America alone. So there are congregations that are explicitly missionary in nature, and yet their understanding of mission is quite different from ours. What they mean basically is sometimes, okay, they have a mission in one place, in a particular country or something like that. And it has amazed me that anytime congregations speak about interculturality, missionary availability, etc., they point to our congregation as the example. And it's just a very nice feeling. But then I used to think, whereas others look up to us for our dedication to the missionary vocation, which is very true, and how passionate we are, we can also ask ourselves, inside ourselves, how are we feeling? How passionate are we feeling about being sent out? We are really good to rise up to the needs that present themselves. We have very well drafted guidelines for formation, leadership, finance, communication, etc. We are not afraid to spread out our tents. We are generous and magnanimous. We invite people to share our life and mission, etc. We have well-established roots, a tradition, and years of lived history in the diversity of our ministries. But we are also like the others. In what way are we like the others? It is, sometimes they ask, what is your charism? What's the charism of your congregation? And suddenly I'm taken aback and say, now what to say? But now more and more I realize it is the missionary availability, the missionary thrust of our congregation. That is actually the uniqueness of our congregation. That is our charism. That is a charism. It's not just one work or one specific area of apostolate, but being missionary is the charism. And in the discipleship, in our vowed life, and in our availability for the service of the church, we are like other congregations, because the Spirit bestows charismatic and hierarchical gifts on the church. The spirit with which a congregation lives on is called the charism of that congregation. The charism of the founder is not purely for the founder alone, and it is to be continued through the members up to the death of the founder, through the external structures or other visible and invisible forms. And for us, what is bequeathed to us from our founder, from our foundation, is this mission, this explicitly mission-oriented that direction that we are taking, the mission. Now, to be called by God to a membership to a body, that's a religious congregation, is to be invited by Him to share in that charismatic gift of the Holy Spirit, which has overflowed from the founder to the members of the congregation. And for us, that charism is mission, not one aspect of mission, but often that mission. For us, SSpS, it is our missionary availability that characterizes our congregation. Not so much, it is like identical twins. For the mother, the identical twins, they are different in personality, even in appearance. For outsiders, it may not be. So something like that is for the insider of the congregation, there is something that you see. This is what the communion I was talking about, where the spirit of the founder, which gives a distinctive style to our community life and our way of living the vows. For example, there are congregations that have very clear criteria where they will be living or working. Joining such a congregation, one knows where she will be for the rest of her life. I will be living here, I will be working here, I'll be dying here, and I'll be buried here. But for us, that's not the case. We could be anywhere. So synodality for us means being in communion with the congregational mission, participating fully in its charism and mission, each according to her capacity, training, and talent. Often we have SSpS, sometimes when they are well into their 50s and 60s, are now asking for a mission experience outside there. My own advice would be, to do that when we are still young, but it's more enjoyable, it's more effective, and rather than when we grow older and when we have body aches and when we are tired. So to risk that while we are young, to be available, to be courageous. If we are afraid to take it, of being prophetic
dari kenabian dalam panggilan kita.
aspect of our call, if it excludes any risk taking. We often hear also people saying mission is everywhere, you don't have to go out in order to be mission. It is true, it is everywhere, and precisely for that reason it need not be where you are only. We can be available also elsewhere. So communion and participation in SSpS life and mission has a lot also to do with, this is also explained very well in the synodal document, but the intercultural approach, going beyond my own culture and telling the world that it is possible to live together, to work together as a community, as a congregation, that it is possible. Synodality is about the formation of the heart, continuous and ongoing, with attention to interiority and conscience, prayer and silence, through active and meaningful liturgical and sacramental celebrations. Pope Francis, in his audience in this year, in January, he said, apostolic zeal is the very oxygen of Christian life. At times, apostolic fervor to share the good news can diminish in us. But when we lose sight of the horizon of proclamation, our Christian life suffers. We become closed in on ourselves and wither away. And then he says, keeping the missionary dimension alive provides the oxygen for Christian life. I think it's a very beautiful imagery that he has said. So how does the notion of synodality permeate our practice of mission? Synodality does not happen automatically. Inclusion, participation, communion, they don't happen automatically. It's a process. So what might build communion? I think one of the ways is it's important to be familiar with the lives, the history, the constitutions and chapters, the biographies and the notable members and anecdotes, feasts and prayers of the congregation. That's not the sole way of building communion, but it can help. The 15th General Chapter Direction, paragraph 5 says, impelled by the Spirit's call to the Church for synodal journey, we review and expand our collaboration, networking and interconnectedness. We seek to cross multiple borders. I think synodality is also about crossing multiple borders. I think here we have to take care not to institutionalize mission in coordinators and animators. We desire better formed, better accompanied and less isolated SSpS. The loneliness and isolation that members may face in the community or in the province is something that we need to pay attention to. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I attended a conference by Ted Dunn. And in that conference, he made this statement. He said, if the conditions are right, life is inevitable. I think the synodality is also about creating the right conditions so that life may thrive. If there is less life, maybe the conditions are not right. So are we doing enough to grow in consciousness of global mission? Do we engage in conversations, share experiences, encourage each other, or are we killer joys, narrating horror stories about our mission experience? Are our conversations about other peoples and cultures uplifting, encouraging, informed, and positive? Often we fall into the trap of spending too much time on our nostalgic past saying how things were, or in the complacent attitude that says we have always done it this way. So the synodal document mentions two main spiritual temptations with regards to diversity. First is the temptation to remain trapped in conflict, such that our horizons shrink and we lose sense of the whole and fracture into sub-identities. We form our small identities. The second temptation is to spiritually become detached and disinterested in the tensions, continuing to go our own way without involving ourselves with those close to us. The new geography of the presence of consecrated life in the church and in our congregation is drawing new cultural balances. This should foster a new enthusiasm for the congregation. So this is another call for us, especially in terms of a communion and participation. And the last point I want to say in this is being permanently in a state of mission. And I quote Pope Francis, who said, "We need a pastoral and missionary conversion. Mere administration can no longer be enough. Let us be in a permanent state of mission." And in Evangelii Gaudium, he says, passion for mission is this also, being permanently in a state of mission. That we don't attract people to religious life or to the church by proselytism, that is conversion, but by the church grows by attraction, it says. Though mission demands great generosity on our part, and he says it would be wrong to think of it as a heroic individual undertaking, that's something that I am doing. No, because it is first and foremost the Lord's work, surpassing anything that we can see and understand. And I think he says, then this realization that must fill us with spirit of joy. God loved us first. God gives growth. This is the cause of our joy. I think this also we need to understand also our religious vocation as a blessing, a grace, a favor done to me rather than a sacrifice. And it is to be celebrated thus. It's not to be lived with a long face as if to say, I am making this great sacrifice for God. And in fact, God should be grateful to me almost. No? So I like to quote here what Pope Benedict said. Benedict XVI said, being a Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty idea, but from an encounter with a person, the person of Jesus Christ, which gives life a new horizon and a decisive direction. I find it very, very helpful. So this is the starting point for passion for a mission. Communion and mission are profoundly interconnected. So there are also a number of things more about the geographical expansion that it says that must be also a congregation as it expands geographically must also have adequate revision of the lifestyle, structures, mindset, and cultural knowledge. All these things are mentioned in the document of called New Wine in New Wine Skins. It's not Sandra Schneider's book. This is a guidelines brought up by the Vatican in 2017 about the challenges that religious life is facing, especially women religious. And there it says that it is faithfulness in the spirit that will guide us to find our place in the church at the service of humanity. And it's also say, and it makes an observation. It's a very nice document if you want to read this. And it says that women's religious congregations, we have much more dialogue, we engage in mission, we give better testimony and example, we meet longer and more frequent, we share, we work together. But they say it has also come to our attention that women's communities and women religious in general are far more suffering, enduring abuse, constrained and exploited in their own system than the men religious. And I think this is something for us to pay attention to. No, it's just a very serious observation. I feel the new wineskin is making. So at a later point, maybe we can think about this. I will come to the conclusion. Okay, about the synod. May I share the screen once again?
Yeah, please.
I would like to share this with them. Yes, sometimes people ask, what will happen from this synod? Okay, the synod happens, and then how is it carried forward? Any fruit, anything will happen, things like that. No, there is no automatic or magical response or answer to this. We don't know what will happen like that. No, nothing will happen. We have to work it out from our own. It has to come from within. There's no outside solution that's going to come, with regards to the fruit that it will bear. And I like to end this, maybe to explain this further. I like to say the story of the flower and the fruit from the book. It's a collection of poems by Rabindranath Tagore called Fruit Gathering, in which he gives an imaginary conversation between a flower and a fruit, in which the flower asks the fruit, "Oh fruit, how far are you from me?" Then the fruit replies, "I am hidden within your heart, O flower." Then the flower asks, "Oh fruit, when will I see you?" Then the fruit replies, "If you are waiting to see me, I have no chance." And Tagore concludes by saying that the flower must die, hoping the fruit will emerge. The flower does not see the fruit. In the act of dying, the flower gives way for the emerging fruit without seeing it. Only when the flower dies, the fruit can emerge. And I think it is often so in our lives, coming from the situations that you can identify yourself with this kind of feelings or situation. No? What will happen with the synodal process? What changes will we see in our lifetime? We don't know. What visible, tangible implications will synodality have on our congregation? We cannot say. But we have to sow the seed, do our best, and leave the rest to God. All the synodal documents, all the drafts that are coming up, also the latest one that's come out, the draft has come out in June, they are very frank in the diagnosis of the problems the church is facing, religious congregations are facing. But they are not hopeless. They are encouraging, involving, leading, and facilitating participation. So the steps we take in this synodal journey as a congregation will help us to rekindle the passion for mission and to realize the joy of a life given over to God in the SSpS way. Thank you.